feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know.
Greetings, Sanbonani, Dumelani, Abshini. Hello out there once again. It's your boy AK back again with another episode of seeking practical solutions for practical societal issues. We are still on that path of addressing social challenges that members of society are facing within our respective communities or neighborhoods. And on this episode, I'm actually being joined by Mr. Serala. In fact, he's not joining us. He's coming back for another episode. He is coming back for some more, And we'll actually be talking about the role of educators in today's society. As we are all aware that the world is actually changing at the moment. Industries are trying to adapt to all the changes that are happening in the different fields of our industries, But apart from that, let me just give him the platform to formally introduce himself. Let us know what he's been up to since the last time we spoke, if there are any changes. So, Mr. Serala, how's it, man?
I know. It's nice to be here. It's good. It's good.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much for inviting me again. It's been a bit hectic. I'll tell you that. So recently we just come from exams. We're still closed in the June holidays, but you can see that next door we have a class of mine that is there, and we are having support classes, which is something that I'll also tap into at some point when we speak about the role of educators and so on. So it's been good, we've been pushing, you see, with our work, we never stop working.
There's no time for sleep.
Yeah.
So now welcome back to the show.
Sure.
It's great to have you here. For sure, even the real talkers out there we're wondering, when are you coming back for another episode here?
I hope they can hear me.
They can. So, but on this episode, as I said, that we'll actually be talking about the role of educators in today's society, and we'll also be discussing how educators and us as the community can make the classroom a healthier learning environment for learners. And the other thing that we'll also be talking about is corporal punishment.
Yes.
If whether corporal punishment should actually be brought back into our schooling systems. As you are aware as educators that at the moment, the cases where learners are attacking educators in the classroom, they keep on going up. So we actually need to find a solution to that problem.
Definitely.
So before we actually jump into today's episode, let me just remind our new viewers who are actually tuning in for the first time to actually hit that subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube. And if you are listening from any listening platform, just hit that follow button. It goes a long way. And please don't also forget to hit that share button. It goes a long way as we are sharing our podcast with your families and friends, as we keep on growing. But apart from that, let's get into today's business.
Sure.
So, Mr. Serala, let's kick off the episode by trying to find out the role of teachers in today's society. As I said earlier on that we are currently living in times where everything is changing for Industry 4.0s.
Yeah.
Right now there's this virtual reality worlds coming into existence. So what's the role of educators in today's society?
Brother man, I've always, it's something that I've been preaching, to say that it's very important that we ask these questions, especially that one, because we have a certain, a two-dimensional issue where we find that we live in a society and the school itself is its own society, right? And some of the things that affect us externally in all ways affect us internally at school as well. You know, I'm talking about your corona, your socio-economic conditions, you know, load shedding, all these things, they affect us internally at school as a society, you see. Yeah. And then we need to then reimagine, you know, what it means to be an educator in this, you know, space and time where we are having all these issues that are there, that are happening in our country more especially. And we look at in our field where as educators, I mean, you know, where we've been talking about, you know, an issue of literacy in this country, right? Then you think about the kind of learners that we are bringing into the society. We must never by any, you know, in any way detach who we are as human beings. I think as an educator, we must remind ourselves that as an educator, we have a responsibilities of parents. We are dealing with young ones, and when you deal with a human being, you must understand that you are also, as an educator, a human being. So what is your role as a human being who deals or finds themselves in a profession where they encounter a lot of time in a child's life, right? Because we cannot only then say that we are going to leave out our humanity and just focus on academics. You see business like we come to work and then we leave, as if the people that we are, you know, working with do not feel, do not taste, do not eat. You know, they are not human. So we need to reimagine our profession and ourselves as educators to say, what is your role in the classroom? What is your role as an educator outside of the society, but beginning from inside, okay? Then once you are able to do that, even in your approach in teaching, we call that inclusivity. We are able to be inclusive of all these material conditions that these learners are going through. Then you understand that this is a learner. If you want them, I mean, we all want our learners to achieve 100%. But if you find that, no, this learner did not do their homework, when you show homework in this country.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it also comes from the point that, like, as parents at home, we are not playing a part in, like, our learners, like taking interest in, like, the learner's life, like
schooling, academic life. Yes. And also, like, so this is where you come in, because, and remember in our previous conversation, because this is something we'll always tap into, is, you know, like I said, the external issues always affect in us internally as educators, because we find that children do not come from the same households. Now, there are those who need support, and it's been proven, even in varsity, you would know this, that if you don't have support from home, it's one of the hardest thing to do, you know. Support has been proven to be very crucial in the progressiveness of the academic life of learning, whether in varsity or in basic education. So you find that the learner did not do their homework. Yours is not to come in and then scold the child, or this is where our role must come in as the beacons of hope. When I left UJ, we were told the beacons of hope. I didn't. No, because also UJ needs itself to, there are some things that they need to change, to fix, before they even tell us as educators what we should be. When they themselves are not practicing what they are teaching us to become in society, where they are the fountain of knowledge, where these are centers of knowledge production, they are the ones that are, you know, bringing about the society of teachers, right? So we are, I think, for me, we are beacons of hope, where when we talk about a learner and a teacher relationship, it must not only be based on academics. We must find the humanity in us the humanity in learners as well, to be able to interact with learners in a way that they do not only see an educator, but they see someone that in a society that has a lot of GBV, in a society that has a lot of substance abuse, where learners are being in relationships with older people, all these things where there needs to be guidance of some sort that needs to take place. You see, that is where we are. That is where we should come in as beacons of hope.
That's true. Nah, I hear you. So when we are still all discussing the roles of educators in today's society, let's step into some of the problems that are actually preventing you to actually fulfill that role to its, give 100% to that role at the moment. What would you say are some of the barriers preventing educators from actually unlocking 100% of their teaching capabilities or capacities within the classroom?
I think one of the things that we look at, and I hate saying it, but sorry, it's something that we cannot shy away from, and also must be very critical in our engagement when we argue that the support that we are getting from the department, for me as someone who's new in the profession, I feel the support that we are getting is genuine and is meant to develop educators so that they can become better classroom managers and be beacons of hope. However, they are giving us, they are developing us in a context that itself does not allow for development to be practiced. Right? So you develop an educator, but you develop them, you teach them how to work with ICT integrated aids, where now we are starting to use laptops, test all these things.
Industry 4.0.
The 4IR. So, we're people of marijuana, in that sense, but you find that you learn that in a context where you have ESCOM issues, we have load shedding. So you see that some of these workshops, they are necessary, but for what kind of schools? So if you find yourself in a school in the township where it's battling with electricity, or in the rural areas, you still attend that workshop, but in practicality, so it's so that you have the skills, but how are you able to, in practice, deliver in the classroom? Sanitation, space, all these issues that the class of 76, some of the arguments or some of the issues that they had are still prevailing today when we talk about the historical legacy that are still, holding us back as a country to move forward in terms educational, So those are some of the barriers, and we find that with us, when we speak about parents, we know we are parents. You get home tired, you don't want anything, and then you must assist. Learner has a lot of homework because we give them homework. We say the idea is to keep them out of the street, but also the idea is to also check and assess whether what you have been teaching is understood and to what level you've understood. And if not, how are you able to assist, right? So we find barriers at home where it's overcrowded, there's no space, there's no conducive learning environment, there's a lot of noise, there's no table, it's all these barriers. You have a parent, like we're saying, is not really much interested, but even those who are interested, they have their own, I've been speaking to a few parents in my my grade 7. Some of them are developing themselves, they're studying, they try to keep time. They have to juggle a lot of things.
Yeah, there's a lot happening.
And so you find that the identity politics of this country regarding learners of this country, they've been relegated to being the people who are in charge of households at a very young age, and so they are not able to find time to be a child who has homework. So the priority has now shifted from juggling things of the world to academic life. So these learners, some of them, they just can't, because this is a huge social space to interact with other people.
Nah, I hear. That's true. Like, that's something you're actually touching on in like a serious point, Mr. Serala is actually making a valid point right now at the moment when he says that as parents, as community members, where we reside, it's high time we stop like putting a lot of home tasks over there, like instead, like, let's encourage them to study, learn, instead of giving them like endless house chores to do non-stop, and they don't even get the time to actually sit down, even like read like a normal novel, like something recreational.
I mean, it is to bring back the culture of learning in the township, or in the identity fabric of development of this society or this country, is to bring back the culture of academics, the culture of learning, the culture of reading, the culture of respecting a book, the culture of prioritizing a book, right? But now there's a bit of conflict, because we are in a country also where if those who still do not prioritize a book are able to flourish through other means, through other means. So it becomes a bit discouraging when learners look at the immediate conditions of food and you are telling them to read without food in their stomachs. It's another issue on its own.
As educators and the Department of Educators, what do you think can be done to actually address this problem?
One of the things that support educators, especially in the incentive side of things, look, as one is an educator, my salary is not my own. I do not also detach myself from my immediate family and my own issues as a human being. And when I'm at school also, I know that some of my salary will go to these learners because of the issues that are here, right? And that goes out of the heart, but we need as educators to be more, our salaries must increase. As much as those that are in certain spaces of offices at higher level nationally increase. At a ground level, as important as educators are, we also need to be incentivized.
And I feel like you're underpaid
very underpaid
for the work we are doing.
And then you have extra classes. Not only do we have a shortage of, so the contradiction is that we have a lot of graduates in the education field that are qualified to study classroom PGC holders, inclusive of them. So why is there not a systematic or somewhat of a change of curricula where the system is going to be now a bit flexible, because they can hire so also to relax the burnout of educators. The whole notion of AEs, but we'll come there because this is part of also a solution to other issues. Because you find that once you deal with a leaking tap and you deal with the tap instead of mopping, once you deal with the tap, you've covered a whole range of issues. You've covered a wet floor, you've dealt with not having to mop waste of human resource, energy, time, all of that, you see. So the simplest introductions of ways of being within the education system would work. For example, you have AEs, you have teacher assistants who, understand that the government is trying to, but it is just, I feel, to cover themselves, because when we look at other certain aspects, you find that you can get educators to be teacher assistants. What they are gaining is experience, because you find someone who's not been in the field for like 2 years and things are moving.
Yeah.
They need to get up with the time, they need to develop themselves as well. And they are able to understand what the teacher might be looking for. So you have more teacher human resource. So even in the work that you expect them to do, they are able to even do more and do more for the school that they are in. Because once you look at their job description, it won't be much far apart from educators. We say, okay, then you design certain things like this, you work on this and that, and then it's going to be able to lessen the burden, not even the burden, but the load of having to do a lot of admin stuff. You have to do a lot of files, writing, learner profiles, you must check support. It's a lot. So we can discuss this for a long time, but we do need practical solutions such as those ones. And I'll touch on other ones as we go. Just remind me about tutors. That's one of the things that can, make the load less for educators to be able to become better classroom, well-equipped classroom managers.
Yeah, that's true. So before we actually move, it's more like we're actually moving, we're transitioning into how educators are making or creating a healthy learning environment for learners within the classroom, because at the end of the day, we know that all these learners actually have problems. As you said, that family backgrounds are entwined. Maybe one kid comes from a family where the mother and father are fighting, where maybe the father drinks too much. So as educators, how do you deal with these things? And is the Department of Education assisting? Because on one of the episodes that I did, I think it was for the challenges that exist within the teaching sector.
Okay.
So my guest Lesego actually highlighted something. It was more of a question. Why is it that our schools, especially public schools, don't have counselors, a school counselor or a guidance advisor, Don't you think we actually need those things?
We do, because we can only as educators see certain things and understand them in a limited way because of not being able to become experts in certain fields of study. I mean, psychology, to counsel, you need to go, you don't just, we do it because, you learn how to guide, but not as to counsel per se, The problem with public schools is that everything that is public in this country doesn't work.
Yeah, that's true.
So you have a dilapidated public system, service system, and you find that the structures that should be in place are not quite in place, and if so, they are not being used as they should. I know that we have at the police department we have. Even in the social department, we have people who are assigned to certain schools. So when we call, we had an issue with a learner who, from a child headed home in primary, so there was a case with that learner had to move. So social development was involved. We know that you can call, I think, the department from there they could be able to assist, if not the police station, with one. But it's not adequately used. Because my brother, this is where also we come in when we speak about corporal punishment. But I'll come to that now. Public schools have to deal with a lot of historical injustices of redress. There's a lot that public schools do not have, merely because they are public, and the two streamlines of development in this country is private and public. So anything that has, and that is where now we need to, when we speak about implementing certain ideas of ideologies, like the Thomas Sankara oath. Thomas Sankara said, look, the Thomas Sankara oath was based on all servants from his cabinet must use public transport, public health care,
public services.
Then you think that those services, are they good for you to be used? If they are good for you, they should be good for the next person, you see. So if that was the case where President or the President of this country, the Pala, but if that case, if the President was with his cabinet and everyone in Parliament went to their kids went to public school, public health care, all these things, then at least it would have made things a bit easy, because now institutions, public institutions will have adequate and necessary health care and resources. I mean, if you look at, there was a doctor from Mahima Musa, I think, who wrote about the crisis, who was fired and then rehired again because of public safety, for telling the truth, because nothing is working, people are dying because of the incompetency of people. So now you imagine what is happening in public schools, where that is why the impact of it comes back to the illiteracy rate of this country.
That's true. That's definitely true. Like, while we are still on it, like you mentioned something, as I was basing this question, like, with kids, coming forward and being like, okay, I need help, I need to go meet, talk to Mr. Serala. And especially since you are a primary school teacher, So like, how do you go about that? Because for some kids it's actually hard to speak up when it comes to such matters, as an individual. For instance, let's say I'm someone who's shy and children, and I can't speak up in the classroom. So how do you identify such factors within like the learning classroom? Sometimes I'm having these problems and I'm not even acting like aggressive or behaving in a way that can actually tell that I'm actually doing these things.
We have what we call in our lesson plans, my brother. That's why it's important at AKAY that we, as educators, remember, as beacons of hope, we must go back to our humanness. That we are not dealing with people who just, give information and then you expect results tomorrow. These are human beings. And once you understand that, you appreciate how they are. You appreciate, is what we call in the lesson plan situational analysis. Who are you teaching? Then that's where you get to know that Bosi is like this, Bosi lives there. Oh, that's why you find sometimes Bosi, when it's service, is not wearing. That's why Bosi is withdrawn because of clothes. All these things.
So, as an educator, it's all about making time to understanding your learners, building a relationship.
Yes. There's nothing that can happen without you knowing your learners.
That's true.
These are our kids. They love us so much. They love us very much.
I saw when we were coming in, how they were even excited to see you.
Yeah. Hey, no. These are my kids. We must be able to have a relationship of understanding, to say that this is how we relate to each other and this is why we are here. And let us then in our relation, interact with this knowledge in the textbook in the best way that we can, remembering that we are here for the purpose of teaching and learning. And that is a dialogical thing. I learn from you, you learn from me. It's like that.
Just like we're doing at the moment. I'm the learner, you are the teacher, you know.
And you will teach at some point and I will learn.
That's true, you know. So like, I want us to actually take a quick break and
okay.
So you can go and actually check up on your learner side for the support classes, you know.
Yeah.
So, but before we do that, let me just remind the real talkers out there to actually go and check out our community of practical problem solvers, you know. We are still on that path. We have actually established a community of practical problem solvers that's actually focused on finding like practical solutions to all the challenges that we talk about on this podcast, you know. So just visit patreon.com/realtalkwithak. That's where you'll find everything you need to know about our community. You know, there are different tiers, there's even podcast match, you know. But apart from that, let's just take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll actually dive into the corporal punishment. Because I can see you are even ready for it. You are prepared. So, yeah, we'll be back after the short break. Hey guys, from our short break here. And we are still on that path of seeking practical solutions for practical societal issues for all the social challenges that members of society are facing out there. And as you are aware that we are actually talking about the role of educators in today's society and how we can actually create like a healthy, friendly classroom environment. And so those are some of the things that we actually touched on before we actually went on the break. You know, we're taking a look at the role of educators within like the classroom environment and outside of the classroom environment, you know. So like, let's get back to our episode right now. We are actually going to be taking a look at the curriculum, you know, because like there's been this thing, like, it's more of a trend that I've been seeing on Twitter, whereby, what's this guy called, Musi Maiman, has been challenging the Department of Education to actually move or shift the pass mark for maths and science, and if I'm not mistaken. So those are some of the things that we'll actually be taking a look at. But before we actually do that, let me just remind the real talkers, the viewers and the listeners out there that they can actually be part of this conversation by using the hashtag Real Talk with AK just to leave their opinions and views on the topic that we are actually talking about right now at the moment, you know. So Mr. Serala, so let's kick off the episode again by jumping into like the curriculum, you know.
Okay. Firstly, the curriculum. Firstly, we are not going to listen to people like Musmaima, because those are people who do not understand some of the material conditions that affect learning. You see, people like Musmaima, you know, there are people who are trying to come back to the political spectrum in years using the lived experiences of learners, right? Most of my money are just people who are just making a lot of noise without any real contribution to our education system. All they're doing is typing nice English that is not going to be that is not going to change the lives of people, as a failed experiment himself. I mean, so almost are typing from a position of privilege, which is why we say to an extent that we need to decolonize. So we start, when we talk about the curriculum, we cannot talk about decolonization and Afrocentrism, systems of value, what we understand as what this curriculum is supposed to do. If you have a learner who's getting, if you increase the pass rate, does it mean that the the issues of this country will change, they won't.
That's true.
They won't, because we have engineers that are being that are graduating each and every year, that are being produced. There are educators that are being produced each and every year, but we still have a literacy issue in this country. We still have structural issues where engineers are not coming in. We speak about how look at the floodings that took place now in your Durban, in the inner city, your CBD, in Pretoria, and all these places, because of geographical spacing. You look at the township and how much of a geographical depth it is, because everything around and in the township is ill. We live next to mine towns. Right now there's a lot of wind. Then you want to deal with the curriculum, the very same curriculum that you want kids to pass. To pass for what purpose, right? Now, what they particularly means is that you do not necessarily, with this curriculum, you do not have learners it does not produce smart learners. So you increase the pass rate to increase the profit, the existence of labor in this country. All you are doing is just making it difficult for people to attain matric, so that they can labor, because essentially the curriculum and the content in itself is not inclusive of the context that it's supposed to be used to serve in, right? Or to serve. So when we talk about the curriculum, we need to speak about systems of value. Why do we need to increase the pass rate? We need to increase the pass rate because in public schools there is a percentage of learners who, and this is no different to the pass rate in universities. You would say, no, but because the reason why some of us were lucky, so you say that to be funded and to be fully funded, we don't see ourselves as privileged. We were lucky because we could have been one of the people or the learners that drop out at fourth year, second year because of the incompetency of NSFAS, you see. So there are many reasons why learners fail. So when you focus only on 30%, you are negating why they are here. It's as if they got to a certain point and not remembering where they come from. Now, for them to find themselves here, appreciate the route. Many learners pass because there's no support, socio-economic conditions, because of inadequate structures of the classroom and all these things. And we don't address these issues. I was listening to Prof. Lushara at that time. She was speaking about decolonization in a certain aspect and higher education. And he said at some point he was in Germany, and when in Germany there was a tour guide who had a PhD. So it tells you, if a tour guide, you are going to be given a tour by a tour guide.
It's something
so
else.
You have a society that is functioning at a higher standard of level at all these institutions. Your tourism, your publics. If you can have such people, then that is what the curriculum is supposed to be doing, to produce learners that are functioning at that level.
Because personally, I also feel like our learning curriculum and subjects in general, they are not really having that kind of effect on our lives.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons you were mentioning that we have unemployed graduates, engineers, logisticians. It's because of what?
Yes.
From an early age, our learning curriculum is not structured in a way that actually allows us to be business owners, inventors, scientists.
Yes, it does not. I remember a few words that are coming through of the discussion of why I was was listening to this other Nigerian guy. That man asked, in Africa we have a lot of graduates, but where is the innovation? There isn't any innovation that is taking place because we have an identity crisis in this country. The problem of our curriculum is more divergent, so we take from outside and we put everything inside. Right? We are dealing with an imperial education, my brother, and it's all about the systems, the value system is based on commodity. So the more you are able to work for you to have access to money that buys you an iPhone, that's you making it in life. That is supposedly what education is supposed to, it's the purpose of education, my brother. So the curriculum, it's just another thing on its own. I hope we have a time, some point where we call maybe other people who are part of a decolonization process in higher education, and we discuss the curriculum, because when we talk about the curriculum, we cannot just make it's not a binary issue, because issues are many.
Yeah, that's true, and it's quite interesting. So we can actually jump into corporal punishment.
Corporal punishment.
Like as I said earlier on when we kicked off our episode, that we've been seeing these videos on social media, Twitter, Instagram, all our social media platforms, whereby you have learners fighting with educators. It's either verbally or physical, and like it got me thinking. I was like, at this point, should corporal punishment be brought back? Because at the end of the day, don't forget, I think we are the last generation that actually went through those things that corporal punishment in our schooling systems are there.
Hey, my brother, I don't know.
And we turned out well. I'm just saying.
It started in 1996.
Yeah.
So, corporal punishment was banned in 1996. So when you say you are the last generation,
it's been
happening. I don't know about that, my brother. I don't know.
But look at us how it turned out. So like we turned out okay. Here we are. We are an educator. All because of what? That discipline, like so. Do you actually think that corporal punishment is actually something that should be brought back into our schooling systems, or we should either just find new ways of disciplining or enforcing discipline towards learners? But before we actually do that, let's just start by explaining what is corporal punishment, your own understanding of what corporal punishment is. Deal with something urgently, as we are aware that we are actually doing this episode at a school, so there's gonna be disturbances there and there. So we have reached like the wrap-up part of our episode, but there's still going to be a part 2 of this episode, just that like there are situations that we are currently facing. But let me just give Mr. Serala the platform to actually continue with answering the question that I had raised.
I think the issue of corporal punishment, my brother, it goes to two things. It goes to value systems of what discipline is, because discipline in my language might not be the same to you. We do not approach discipline the same. There's positive, there's negative. English says that. But also it has to do with culture. Now, the problem with that is that because South Africa, we have an identity crisis, we have an identity problem, and we see this mostly because our learners are not doing well in their home language, because we have mimicked the English language to a point where lifestyle language comes with a certain kind of, it holds the weight of civilization, which is what Fanon says, because language is you cannot detach it from culture.
That's true.
So we have an issue where, you see, as time goes on, language develops. That's why the dictionary, sometimes we say it's outdated, because there's new language, new terms and all these things. Now, if there are certain types of languages that are not given a chance to grow, then it becomes a problem, because we are only focusing on two streamlines of language, English and Afrikaans, you see.
That's true.
So now it becomes a problem, because once we speak these languages, then our culture, we lose the value of what culture says and how to deal with certain issues, you see. Now, corporal punishment is a violent process. Corporal punishment is a violent process, and the reason why a corporal punishment was stopped was to redress the historical injustices that happened in the past. There was an 1996, and this is the reason.
I saw it when I was doing research for
Yeah. So that was the reason. So you see that now we are dealing with educational law. The educational law that still uses, that is encompassed by Roman Dutch law. So those are the value systems that we are using in an Afrocentric context. So as Africans, we are using something, a value system that we do not even understand, because our that word, when you say it, it holds a certain weight of culture.
That's true.
So when you speak about how to deal and discipline, it's as if now thinking is only an exclusive, preserve of the English language. It's as if there isn't any alternative ideas on how to deal with corporal punishment using other systems of value from different types of languages, So it becomes a problem, because now one good thing that I agree is that how to deal with corporal punishment would be taking it as a barrier to learning. So what we are told as educators to deal with corporal punishment is that we must try to reinforce developmental type of punishment. Now you think, must come up with a productive punishment that does not look like a punishment.
Which one is this?
What are we dealing with? Because if you are going to teach a learner, there's cause and consequence, cause and effect,
Whatever, anything that you do, it's either there will always be a good consequence or a bad.
Yes, the implications of the decisions that we take. That's why there's altruism and all that, where we speak about Kant, Immanuel Kant in sociology, when we talk about ethics, doing something wrong so that at the end it can be right, or, the end justifying, or the means justifying the end. All these things have to do with, that is part of educational law. What I would agree with is that most of the learners that are doing corporal punishment are learners, or those who are, affected by corporal punishment. Instead of doing that, we must look into what is the issue with this learner. Then that speaks to you, the teacher, as a beacon of hope, understanding the humanity that the child brings in your presence in the classroom or carries with them, you see. So before you even start being mad or start to, scold the child for not doing their homework, before you even get to the punishment, try to put yourselves in that learner's shoe. Even for that day, if you talk about yesterday, are you fine? What's happening at home? Get the basics out of the way of humanity, so to understand what could have been the barrier to the problem. Then what would we call as positive and productive punishment would be being closer to the child. Because what I've learned is, I've now, because I coach soccer, I wear soccer boots, I train with them, these boys, they know. I've gotten to understand others outside of the academic space, and you get to know a child, and they get to even understand you, and that gets you closer for you even in the classroom, for them to be able to do the academic work because of how they relate to you. So with that, I will leave it with that. Whether they bring it back or not, I think as long as we don't deal with the issues that need to be dealt with in this country, I do not see a way that the literacy and the level of high-functioning society educators would be, or high-functioning people in the society, will be produced from this type of education, even though you increase it.
No, thank you, Mr. Serala. It's been a pleasure having you on the episode, So, we can actually conclude for now.
Yes.
For now. As I said during the break, that we'll actually do a part 2 of this episode, as time is not actually on our side at the moment,
Yes.
So, to all our real talkers out there, it's been an honor having you get to know more about our education sector in South Africa, because there's actually a lot happening with it.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's a word from us, don't forget to click that subscribe button, don't forget to go and check out our social media platforms, on Twitter it's @ThePeople's Podcast, that's where you can also interact with us, it's a community on its own. We actually have a Twitter community standing on its own, We are out here building these communities. But apart from that, Mr. Serala, once again, thank you for your time. It's been an honor. I've actually acquired a lot of knowledge that I'm still going to sit down, process.